Welcome to the Equity Conscious Leader, a new generation equity podcast and YouTube channel where we chat with leaders about tangible system change and strategies to advance and sustain equity work in their organizations. Our conversations dive deep into the 6 dimensions of equity conscious leadership. So how do you lead with transformational system change for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Let's find out on this episode of the Equity Conscious Leader with your host and educational equity leader, Dr. Jag Lathan.
So in the example of shadowing, right? So you have an organization that is committed to understanding more the experiences that students are having. There's also a book around student shadowing, EL student shadowing or something. So this is a similar strategy that the author talks about. And one of my questions is around what then do people do with that information? Because that's data, right? Mm-hmm. You're shadowing a kid, you probably have some kind of observation form. First of all, you let the kids know, right. Or at least, have some kind of culture where they understand that adults are going to be in the room and, to learn more about the experiences of students. But once you have that information, so it's very clear. So for example, when I worked at a county office in Southern California, we actually engaged in student shadowing activities. And I remember we learned in some of the shadowing experiences, we led staffs through it, that students who are learning English as an additional language, so like multilingual learners, did not have the opportunity to actually use English language in their classes very often. Wow. It was very dismal, right? It might have been in one class, they might have spoke for 2 minutes, right? But in order to learn English proficiently, you got to use it, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was one learning that we had. The question is, once people have the information, how do they actually, what are they actually doing with it, right? And that to me is like where equity work gets stalled, because people have the information and it's either the will to do something differently, it's the skill to do something differently that they might be lacking. Something is happening. So let's kind of conversate about, so now what? Now that we have the information, we know that, English learners are speaking in most classes in this particular example for 2 minutes versus in a 50-minute period, right? So share it. We have to share the learning. So if the system has this goal for literacy, like keeping with our literacy example, and we are now shadowing students to understand their experience, we use the learning to articulate back our priority. Our goal is to increase literacy because we have shadowed X number of students at X number of schools in particular grades, particular student groups, and this is what we've seen so far, just at the tip. You share that information with your board, you share that information with your principals, with your teachers, right? Because that is going to support getting the buy-in. Here's why we're prioritizing this. This is a problem, or this is a success, whatever the learning is, share it. And then you use that data set, that experience, the similarities you get from the students shadowing or differences across the system or across the schools, and you can use that to refine the goal. Well, perhaps over here, we saw that in our student shadowing, there's a positive experience with these teachers, or there's a positive experience with transportation. I don't know, whatever the thing is. What are they doing?
Right.
Yeah.
So we use that to equip our communities with understanding our goal, understanding our priority, and refining it. And as the learning continues, the shadowing doesn't stop, because you mentioned engaging with teachers. So what's their experience as we've prioritized this goal? What support do they need? What is working well for them, or what are they unclear about? Well, what about the principals? If the system has a goal, principals also have a whole other array of duties, keeping all the humans safe and alive while they're on campus. So how does this goal impact their work? And it gets more refined, the goal, based on the learning, right? Like this constant inquiry of how you're doing.
Yeah, and I would also say also for district level people, because sometimes there's a disconnect, right? It's like you have data, you know that some changes are going to happen, new strategies are going to be implemented, new programs are going to be tried on, whatever it is. District office staff also need to have that alignment and be able to support the school site,
That's right.
the school sites and the learning that's happening there. So thank you for saying that. And it's something that has always made me curious. And as I watch systems that are, doing well, the students are doing well, and then systems where they're not doing as well, right? So student outcomes, that's what I'm talking about. And mostly children of color in California, I would say that's where my focus has been. And the schools that are doing well, or the districts that are doing well, they do something with that data that's different than they did before, right? When I was a principal, I remember my staff said, I was a new principal. They're like, let's have Saturday school. And I was like, and I had just come from being a teacher. And I said, what are we going to do differently in Saturday school that we didn't do Monday through Friday?
Right.
If it's the same thing, then basically what you're doing is you're yelling at kids on Saturday.
Right.
Same exact thing. Right. Monday through Friday.
And I thought, is for what purpose?
Right.
What are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal of this program?
So then it was, no, let's look at what's happening in the classroom, the 6.5 hours a day we have them, and figure out what's working well and what's working and what's not working well, so that we can make some changes to the instruction, right? So I really want to help people kind of understand, in systems change with a focus on equity, you do something different. And it's not easy all the time. And sometimes you get pushback from the community, right? Sometimes you get pushback from the boards. You get pushback from whoever else, the folks who've been in the system for a long time. They're like, we've been doing it like this for 30 years. And I'm like, for 30 years, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And so we need it to work, because we need all of our kids to be literate. We need them to be able to have the future that they deserve to have and have options in their adult life. Anyway, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. No, I follow you. What really is resonating with me is what you're describing about how different sectors of the community, we call them our partners, right? Our educational partners, how they're going to respond to whatever the initiative is. And what comes to my mind, and you talk about it in your dimensions, I believe it's dimension 6, just the presence of both the numbers, the quantitative data, and the experiences, the voices of these partners, the qualitative data. Because while I think of the example of parents that you mentioned, while there are moments where they will support the goal, the initiative, and there's moments when they will not. And there's room for both positions, right? And ultimately, they're all being concerned with the outcomes of their student. And so, which is why I believe it's important to share that qualitative data, share what we're learning. We're sitting down with teachers, and teachers are saying this, and put that in the face, in front of what's the story. That's the story. Yeah. And that's when I think about equity work and the data pieces, the story is a part of the context. And I was just presenting on this 2 weeks ago in a room of assessment leaders. And we're talking about sharing the data of our statewide assessments for our systems in the proper context. Like, what else is going along with that? And without sharing the context, we're missing a vital piece. Sure, we can share the numbers, but what do they mean? And where are the discrepancies? And where is their alignment? Right? And really owning that part of the conversation, like all of these pieces have to be present, especially like I'm still thinking about your question about impact, that it's the whole circle. And then whatever it is the system is prioritizing or has as a goal of an outcome they want to change, all of the pieces, the data, the quality, the experiences, all of that should be feeding to this goal in effort to move it. And also,
implementing with fidelity.
Oh, yeah.
That's like one of my things.
Yeah.
I love it because it's like you have this data. We're shadowing kids. We're doing focus groups. We're changing our practice. And this teacher is getting amazing results. This teacher really hasn't moved. And they think they're doing the same thing. But when you actually look at the practice of the person who is getting the results, is usually something in that instruction that's connecting to students where the other person hasn't yet learned that, right? And so I always tell people, do it with fidelity. That means do it to the T. Like keep checking. Is it working? Do your, like checking for understanding constantly throughout your lessons and throughout your day, because then you'll know whether or not students are actually learning it. That's the example that I gave you happens all the time, even with programs. So school will say, well, that school is doing this literacy program or this math program or science. We're going to do it too. And then they do it. They get the program and half the staff is trained, the other half isn't. Where this staff, the whole school got trained, right? They're trying it on. And they're like, oh, it doesn't work. Right? Because the data is showing them like it doesn't work. But it actually, what happened, it wasn't the program necessarily. It was the fidelity. Right? And the supports that happened or did not happen from both of those situations.
And you mentioned that instructional strategy of checking for understanding. And it while it's an instructional strategy, like you said, it applies to the program implementation, and it's this constant inquiry, like, right? And when you mention the teacher who's having the success with the strategy or the goal, bring them into the fold, like this concept of shared power, right? Like the system or the district leader, they're not the experts. The experts are the ones on the front lines managing and doing and serving, right? And so practice every day, every single minute of the day. And so bring that teacher now becomes the expert because they have demonstrated particular outcomes in their classroom, with their setting. And so I think about you bring them into the fold, and then you identify what supports are needed, because clearly that teacher has either mastered something or has something in their toolbox that's efficient and successful. How do you support the other teachers with replicating that? And so it's the conversation of this support. How is the system being undergirded so that, okay, there's strengths over here. They might need less support. We need this school site to have more of the support so that they can get up to the outcomes of it, right? It has to be constantly questioned and constantly examined to be able to explain that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the word conversation, because what I find is, and it's been a practice in education probably since inception, I'm not sure, is teachers are teaching. A lot of times they close their doors. That's the culture of many schools, not all schools. And there is no conversation, right? It's just like, well, her kids must have came in higher. That's why her scores are higher, right? Or that's why she's getting the outcome she's getting, or he's getting the outcomes he's getting. The conversation is so important. That's a part of the process, right? Like, let's actually collaborate and talk about what's happening, how I'm doing it. Come watch my instruction. Right? Let me come watch your instruction. Let's have a conversation about it and really start to dialogue around, what's working well for students. How are you getting those results? So that's one. So we've been talking about school levels. Now let's bring it out to the larger system. The work we're focused on is transforming systems as a whole.